There were a number of things that you guys were able to learn through the experience that you've had and that you were describing up here. It comes in part from the fact that in our laboratory services, we actually have many years of experience now with the use of lean tools and the improved methodologies, just applying the principles to the way you run the area. In fact, I want to start, Nathan, by asking you a question about, given that you were one of the first places in our organization to apply lean, the benefit of that kind of longer-term perspective. Any comments or points of view you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, trying to look at the lean perspective for our department and seeing how the overall process for the laboratory works as a whole. We had to look at workflow and other situations in our department. So we're trying to figure out the best way to make our department more lean and more efficient. And recognizing what was physically in our control, the workflow, our FTE volume, staffing mix, those kind of things. And looking at what's beyond our control, labor reductions, the actual physical, financial part of our department. So we had to really try to understand what was happening in our department itself. How we could actually look at the physical breakdown of our departments. We have 3 technical departments: chemistry, hematology, and micro. And for us, on our side, was trying to figure out what was the best way to make those departments work together, how we could keep these people from being kind of siloed, if you will, just being in one technical department and not be able to function in another. So those ideas we had to go back through and really kind of break down the whole process. From there, we were able to restructure our staff and looking at our staffing models, whether it was putting in a float technologist to go float up or down to cover PTO and vacation needs. But the next step was actually to figure out how we could cross-function these departments together. And that's what we're trying to work on right now, is the cross-functional piece of getting people cross-trained and kind of getting back to more of the roots of what technologists really do, and not just being one department, but a generalist over all departments.
What I love about the work you're describing is you started with improvement work within your sections, and now you're saying, well, how can we cross those silos more effectively? Because that's, creating many more opportunities to improve value, right? What you're doing in the lab is a microcosm for what we're trying to do at Group Health organization-wide. That we create value because we bring all these things together, but it's a real challenge to figure out how to do that well. So how have you used some lean tools to break down those barriers between different sections?
Looking at our staffing mix and looking at our actual scheduling and trying to really build the business model for our department more for flexibility of the workload and not for the individual person. That does sound kind of callous a little bit, but for business needs of our department, we really had to look at that structure. If you have a heavy workload on Monday and light workload on Friday, does it make more sense to have more staff at the end of the week or at the end of the week? So it's trying to accommodate the actual workload and not individual scheduling. So we had to go back and look at our overall staffing mix, who was working like Monday through Thursday, Tuesday through Friday. Maybe it makes better sense to put those people Monday through Friday with a little bit shorter shifts that still accommodate the FTE structure. So we had to go back and break all that down and really spread out the actual workload with the FTE volume and how that's going to work together. Also, we looked at if we have these people cross-trained, can we still accommodate that with a lower staffing mix? If we have someone who's absent that day, can we bring somebody across a discipline and still get the workload done? And so it's understanding all the dynamics of the department internally, but also how we can keep the business goals in mind and still function as a good working group and still meet the demand of our superiors.
So that's hard work. It's very challenging. Barbara, maybe I would turn to you and just ask you, so how do you deal with driving change that affects people's schedules and their lives?
Well, one of the things that we had to work with was a lack of time. We only had about 8 weeks to put this plan into place. We were responding to a labor reduction request, and we had the opportunity at this time to make some big changes. So we had retirements that were happening. Somebody was going back to school. We had a new schedule to make. Nathan and I must have made a bajillion schedules before we came up with one. We had shift changes, we had job changes, we had to rebid the entire two departments because they merged. Unfortunately, we were not able to have any input from the staff, and so we had a very large group of very angry people, and we immediately had to move into change management. So one of the first things we did was go to our HR website for change management, and there's some wonderful tools there. And we immediately posted the 5-question tool from the toolkit and had the staff respond. And we realized they did not understand the impact and the urgency of us making this labor reduction. They did not understand the reasons for making the change. They only understood that they had worked Monday through Thursday and had every Friday off, and they've done that for years. And so they didn't see the business need, and so we had to immediately go into meeting with our staff and talking with them and discussing this and trying to help them fill in the gaps at this time.
These are hard changes, and they are changes that are unfolding not just all across group health, but throughout the healthcare industry these days. So as a manager, what's on your mind as you anticipate driving change like this? What advice do you have given your experience?
Well, Nathan and I have found that you need to be visible as a manager. You can't go in your office and shut the door and do your stuff on your computer and just ignore it. You have got to be out on the floor. You've got to be out with the people. Huddles are critical. You really shouldn't ever miss a huddle. And we have huddles every day, and we have a session at the end of the huddle just for me to give updates, because the people are very anxious, very worried, and you want them to not worry and not be so anxious they can't do a good job. You have to emphasize quality. I said, I know you're grieving, and I don't discount that, but we have to keep our quality up. And you have to be really in tune to the grief, because it was a big loss to people. Some people's hours were cut, some people worked different days, different shifts. So you have to have a lot of compassion, but keep your business sense too. You know, we have a job to do. So we used this form. I was glad to see it on everyone's chair. We had more than one meeting with this form, and we asked everyone to, like, where are you in this project? And we said, it's okay. All right. But we want you to eventually move up here. We're going to work with you. And the team worked together to help people that were really having a difficult time. So we used all this to engage our staff. And the only thing that I would do differently, and it goes back to respect for people, we were talking about that with parents yesterday, and that the people know best sometimes in some things, and some things we have to, you know, there's no choice. But if we had their input on the scheduling and gotten their ideas, they would have come along with us much better. So I wish we had the time to do that. Next time.
So I think this is really an important issue for us at Group Health, and that is, particularly as we're advancing what's been years now worth of applying new tools and improving methodologies and so forth. And that is that a key principle is respect for people and the active engagement of our staff in identifying solutions and so forth. And even if you had done it differently, ultimately some of the changes that have to be made are going to be difficult. And so what you're saying is that those are not irreconcilable issues. But let's not be naive to the fact that managing change won't happen if you don't pay attention to, you know, taking these steps and working our people through this change. Other questions for the two of them?
Just be brave.
All right.